are involved in cyber attacks against the United States and interfering in our elections?
The threat of cyber attacks is a broad issue, and those are coming from many, many corners of the world. Certainly this most recent manifestation, and I think the new threat posed in terms of how Russia has used this as a tool, that introduces even another element of threat. But cyber attacks are occurring from many nations.
So no matter where they come from, if they come from Belgium, if they come from France, if someone is conducting cyber attacks against the United States and we pass a law that authorizes the President to sanction them or actually imposes these sanctions as mandatory, would you advise the President sign it?
I think it is that second element, Senator, that you just described that leaves the executive branch no latitudes or flexibility in dealing with the broad array of cyber threats. I think it is important that those be dealt with on a country-by-country basis, taking all other elements into consideration in the relationship. So giving the executive the tool is one thing. Requiring the executive to use it without any other considerations, I would have concerns about.
So, Mr. Tillerson, I understand your testimony. You're saying it was mandatory. You would not be able to advise the President to sign it because you want to have the President have the flexibility to decide which countries to sanction and which ones to not sanction.
Under which circumstances to sanction.
In essence, because you want to be able, for example, to take other things into account, like, for example, the desire to perhaps improve relations with that country, and therefore the President maybe doesn't want to sanction them, even though they're attacking us.
There could be a whole array of important issues that require consideration, including trading issues, trade relation issues, mutual agreements around our national security. So I don't think it's appropriate, and certainly for me at this time, to indicate that I would just say that it's a blanket application. I think that is the role of the executive branch. It is the role of the Secretary of State and the State Department to assist and inform the President in judgments about how to use what is a clearly powerful tool.
Well, again, I mean, what's troubling about your answer is the implication that somehow, if there is some country that we're trying to improve relations with or have significant economic ties with, the President, you may advise the President not to impose sanctions on that country, on individuals in that country, out of concern that it could damage the rest of our relationship with them on a cyber attack, which is a direct attack on our national security and our electoral process. So let me ask you, would you advise the President-elect to repeal the Obama administration's recent executive orders regarding cybersecurity and Russian interference in the 2016 elections?
I think the President-elect has indicated, and if confirmed, I would support that what's really required is a comprehensive assessment of our cyber threat and cybersecurity policies. In my view, based on what I've been able to read and have been briefed, we do not have a cybersecurity policy. We do not have a comprehensive strategy around how to deal with what has been a rapidly emerging threat.
But
and as I said, we're seeing it manifest itself in ways that we never envisioned.
But Mr. Tillerson, I understand the cybersecurity plan. We have to have one to protect ourselves and handle cyber attacks against our country. That is separate from the question of whether people that have already conducted attacks should be sanctioned and singled out. There's an executive order that is now active that has sanctioned those individuals, and my question is, do you believe that executive order should be repealed by the incoming President?
If confirmed, Senator, I would want to examine it and all aspects of it in consultation, not only with the President, but with other interagencies that are going to have input on this as to their views.
Well, again, Mr. Tillerson, if all the executive order says is that certain individuals responsible for cyber actions against the United States will be sanctioned, and you still need to examine whether that's a good idea or not. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me ask you this question. Is Vladimir Putin a war criminal?
I would not use that term.
Well, let me describe the situation in Aleppo, and perhaps that will help you reach that conclusion. In Aleppo, Mr. Putin has directed his military to conduct a devastating campaign. He's targeted schools, markets, not just assisted the Syrians in doing it. His military has targeted schools and markets and other civilian infrastructure. It's resulted in the death of thousands of civilians. This is not the first time Mr. Putin is involved in campaigns of this kind. Back when he was just appointed prime minister before he was elected, and I'm sure you're aware of that period of time, there was a series of bombings, and they blamed it on the Chechens. And Mr. Putin personally said that he would punish them, and so he ordered the Air Force to bomb the Chechen capital of Grozny. They used Scud missiles to hit hospitals, the city's main outdoor market, packed with shoppers. 137 people died instantly. They used thermobaric and fuel-air explosive bombs. These are the bombs that ignite, and they burn the air breathed in by people who are hiding in basements. They used cluster munitions. He used battlefield weapons against civilians. And when it was all said and done, an estimated 300,000 civilians were killed, and the city was completely destroyed. By the way, there's credible body of reporting, open source and other, that this was all those bombings were part of a black flag operation on the part of the FSB. And if you want to know the motivation, here's what it is. Putin's approval ratings before the attacks against the Chechens was at 31%. By mid-August of that year, it was at 78% in just 3 months. So based on all this information and what's publicly in the record about what's happened in Aleppo and the Russian military, you are still not prepared to say that Vladimir Putin and his military have violated the rules of war and have conducted war crimes in Aleppo.
Now, those are very, very serious charges to make, and I would want to have much more information before reaching a conclusion. I understand there is a body of record in the public domain. I'm sure there's a body of record in the classified domain, and I think in order to deal with a serious question like this,
Mr. Tillerson, what's happened in Aleppo is in the public domain. The videos and the pictures are there.
Fully informed before advising the President.
Well, I encourage you, there is so much information out there about what's happened in Aleppo, leaving the Chechen issue aside. What happened there is clearly documented as well. There's so much information out there. It should not be hard to say that Vladimir Putin's military has conducted war crimes in Aleppo, because it is never acceptable, you would agree, for a military to specifically target civilians, which is what's happened there through the Russian military. And I find it discouraging, your inability to cite that, which I think is globally accepted. I want to, in my last minute and a half here, move really quickly to an additional question. In fact, I want to enter 2 things into the record, Mr. Chairman, without objection.
Without objection.
The first is a partial list of political dissidents, journalists, and critics of Vladimir Putin who were suspiciously murdered or died under highly suspicious circumstances. The second thing I want to enter into the record is a letter addressed to this committee by Vladimir Murza, who himself was mysteriously poisoned and is an opponent of the Putin regime. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Mr. Tillerson, do you believe that Vladimir Putin and his cronies are responsible for ordering the murder of countless dissidents, journalists, and political opponents?
I do not have sufficient information to make that claim.
Are you aware that people who oppose Vladimir Putin wind up dead all over the world, poisoned, shot in the back of the head? And do you think that was coincidental, or do you think that it is quite possible, or likely, as I believe, that they were part of an effort to murder his political opponents?
Well, people who speak up for freedom in regimes that are repressive are often at threat, and these things happen to them. In terms of assigning specific responsibilities, I would have to have more information. As I indicated, I feel it's important that in advising the President, if confirmed, that I deal with facts, that I deal with sufficient information, which means having access to all information, and I'm sure there's a large body of information that I've never seen that's in the classified realm. I look forward, if confirmed, to becoming fully informed, but I am not willing to make conclusions on what is only publicly available or have been publicly reported.
None of this is classified, Mr. Tillerson. These people are dead. Political opponents are dead.
Your question was people who were directly responsible for that. I'm not disputing these people are dead.
Senator Menendez.
Thank you. Mr. Tillerson, congratulations on your nomination. Thank you for coming by to meet with me. And I'd like to take this opportunity to expand upon the conversation we had last week. Since you've worked in one sector for one company throughout your entire career, getting a sense of your worldview is incredibly important, since you will be the chief advocate and advisor to the President-elect on those issues. So I'd like to go through a series of questions. I think many of them can be answered by a simple yes or no. Others will probably take a greater, more extensive answer. So, and you've alluded to some of this in your opening statement. So let me go through several of them. Do you believe it is in the national interest of the United States to continue to support international laws and norms that were established after World War II?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that the international order includes respecting the territorial integrity of sovereign countries and the inviolability of their borders?
Yes, sir.
Did Russia violate this international order when it forcefully annexed Crimea and invaded Ukraine?
Yes, it did.
Did Russia's continuing occupation of foreign countries violate international laws and norms?
I'm not sure which specific countries you're referring to.
Well,
other
the
than-
annexation of Crimea, the
Yes, sir.
eastern Ukraine, Georgia, just to mention a few.
Yes, sir.
Does Russia and Syria's targeted bombing campaign in Aleppo on hospitals, for example, violate this international order?
Yes, that is not acceptable behavior.
Do you believe these actions constitute war crimes?
Again, Senator, I don't have sufficient information to make that type of a serious conclusion. Coming to that conclusion is going to require me to have additional
Do you understand what the
specific facts.
standard is for a war
I do.
crime? And knowing that standard and knowing what is all within the realm of public information, you cannot say whether those actions constitute a war crime or not.
I would not want to rely solely upon what has been reported in the public realm. I would want confirmation from agencies who would be able to present me with indisputable facts.
For all the
Senator
answers,
Menendez, if I could, let me ask a little bit.
if you won't take my time, Mr.
No, I'm not taking your time. It'll be added back. If you had sufficient evidence, though, in looking at classified information that had taken place, would that not be a war crime?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
For all of these answers that you've given me, does the President-elect agree with you?
The President-elect and I have not had the opportunity to discuss this specific issue or the specific area.
Well, in your statement on page 3, you say, in his campaign, President-elect Trump proposed a bold new commitment to advancing American interests in our foreign policy. I hope to explain what this approach means and how it implement that policy if I am confirmed as Secretary of State. So I assume to some degree that you've had some discussion about what it is that worldview is going to be in order to understand whether you're willing to execute that on behalf of the person you're going to work for.
In a broad construct and in terms of the principles that are going to guide that, yes, sir.
And I would have thought that Russia would be at the very top of that, considering all the actions that have taken place. Did not happen?
That has not occurred yet, Senator.
It's pretty amazing. You built a career on ExxonMobil that you said afforded you the opportunity to engage regularly with world leaders, including Vladimir Putin in Russia. In 2013, he awarded you with the Order of Friendship Award. And in our conversations, you told me you had direct and personal access to the Russian president over the course of your tenure there. Then in 2014, ExxonMobil lobbied aggressively against sanctions on Russia after their invasion of Ukraine. Exxon lobbied against the Stability and Democracy for Ukraine Act, which I introduced in the Senate last year. You employed well-known Washington-based lobbyists to support these efforts. You personally visited the White House and reported that you were engaged, quote, at the highest levels of government. In essence, Exxon became the in-house lobbyist for Russia against these sanctions. Sanctions are one of the most effective diplomatic tools in our arsenal, one we rely on to avoid putting American lives at risk by engaging in traditional kinetic warfare. Now today, in response to a previous question by Senator Cardin, you said sanctions are a powerful tool.